Good afternoon. I'm Islay from the New Zealand Taxpayers Union. I'm here with our Executive Director, Jordan Williams, and we're going to have a chat about today's Cabinet reshuffle. So, Jordan, who are the big winners and who are the losers after today's reshuffle?
Well, the obvious big winner is Chris Farfoy going into cabinet. Megan Woods, who picks up some new portfolios and I think deservedly so, has been promoted, at least in the portfolio she's been given, kind of in a little bit of the Mr. Fix-It role, going into to lead what is now a group of ministers to largely replace Phil Twyford. And of course, Deborah Russell, who, whilst not promoted into the executive, gets that plump chair of Finance and Expenditure Select Committee, which is, especially from a taxpayer's perspective, probably the most influential select committee. It's about the best job you can get as a government backbencher MP.
Is it fair that Twyford has lost ownership of his housing portfolio?
Well, he was a little bit. He's become a little bit of the fall guy in relation to Kiwi Build because, let's face it, Kiwi Build was a bit of back of the envelope type policy. It was always going to be damn near impossible to deliver. Where I think we are very happy with is that the government or the Prime Minister has kept him in that urban development role. And that, I think, we could applaud our friends down the road at the New Zealand Initiative that have worked for many years around what really is the problem of housing, and that is the regulatory logjams of the RMA and local government tying up the ability for New Zealanders to supply more housing. And what effectively what the Prime Minister has done is carved out that area for Phil Twyford, and we think he's probably the only minister that really gets this issue and will be able to deliver it while creating a team to sort of fix up the PR perspective and all these other things around Kiwi Build and, of course, the government housing.
In the past, the Taxpayers Union has referred to Megan Woods as a taxpayer hero. Is it good news that she will be overseeing Kiwi Build?
Well, the context of that, I recall Megan Woods, when they first got into government, when the Jacinda Ardern's government was first came to power, Megan Woods made some very positive signals, or she said they were going to get rid of something called the Callaghan Innovation Growth Grants. And this was just the worst of corporate welfare that we had been campaigning on for many years. Unfortunately, though, in the subsequent budgets, the numbers haven't moved. So I'm not sure whether she still has the status of a taxpayer hero.
Chris Farfoy is finally in cabinet with two new portfolios. Is he ready for that?
Oh, I think he is. And I think around Wellington, people have been saying that. What is interesting, though, is that I've heard around the traps, and certainly our experience at the Taxpayers Union has been dealing with his office, is that you have good and bad ministers, but then you also have good and bad officers. Chris is unfortunately in a situation where he has performed very well. He is clearly a very good communicator, savvy operator, seems to really listen, but I know of other people that have had the same problem we have, that he's dealing with a pretty dysfunctional office, or at least from an external stakeholder's point of view, they're one of the more difficult ones to deal with.
But overall, it hasn't actually been a major reshuffle. Should taxpayers be concerned that not enough is going to change?
Well, I guess it depends on whether you think the government's doing a good job or not, because not a lot has really changed. Been a little bit of a shuffling of the individual portfolios, but interestingly, the Prime Minister has not changed the ranks within cabinet. She hasn't rocked the boat or offended egos there. What the other thing that was a bit odd in her press conference is that whereas John Key would walk in and say, "Here's who's promoted, here's who's fired, take a few questions and walk out," it was quite a lot of explaining for actually not a heck of a lot of movement. The other thing that was, again, sort of odd in the media release is it talked a lot about Kiwi Build and referred to Colmar Brunton polling about the popularity of Kiwi Build, which sort of suggests that it was more about PR rather than actually fundamentally changing the mechanics of how this government's working.
And any other particularly significant changes you think are worth considering?
I think it's interesting around the change in the role of David Parker losing economic development to Phil Twyford. And my understanding is that that takes quite a lot of time because it flows also into the way provincial growth funds allocations are made, where where teams of ministers or groups of ministers, of which David Parker was one, will meet and regularly assess provincial growth fund applications. So I suspect that change was to get that off David Parker's desk. The other thing I'd note, and that probably won't get much media attention, but perhaps signals some reform, is Grant Robinson, the finance minister, picks up the Earthquake Commission. And of course, as we've commented before, that with the challenges post Kaikoura and post Christchurch, and the amount of insurance now being only a tiny fraction of the value of the average home versus being most of the value of the average family home when the EQC scheme was introduced, it does suggest that there's going to be some wholesale reform there, which I think is a good thing, and I suspect that's why they've given it to Grant Robinson.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much.